Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kate Mosse. I'm a novelist and a playwright and the biographer of CFT. And it's my enormous pleasure to be here this evening to have a pre-performance chat, a little private chat with the wonderful director of Mack and Mabel, but of course the director of the theatre, Jonathan Church. Just to warn you, because as you know, the show is epic and wonderful and amazing and opens tomorrow, we will be doing half an hour because they need the stage back. So we are going to whip through and we will do a couple of questions at the end if we have time. Jonathan, welcome to your theatre.
Thanks.
It always seems rather daft welcoming
I've been here for the last 2 weeks.
2 weeks, exactly.
Locked in, no daylight.
Locked in on these chairs that we cannot move. I suppose I know you get cross when I gush too much about this,
Yes,
but
maybe.
I think it would be fair to say, in your time here as the director of the theatre, not only have you and Alan and all of your team transformed our beloved CFT, but also
you're
gushing. I haven't even finished actually yet. But you, in particular, one of the things that you have an enormous reputation for now is being one of the leading directors of music theatre and narrative music theatre. Now, Mack and Mabel, is that one of those that had always been in your list of ones you wanted to do, or is it something you saw when you were very young? How did you come to choose this one?
No, I mean, it's been in my brain for a while, and the reason we did it here was very simple, and I'll tell you how I came to know the show in a moment, because it's slightly amusing. Obviously, once Michael did Sweeney Todd, we started a conversation with Michael Ball about what he might want to do next. It had been such a wonderful experience for all of us, and we sat and talked about a couple of shows. And the one that we crystallised on was Mack and Mabel, because for us it was, one of the great things we've now got is an audience who is very loyal to us, who comes and sees our musicals. And so I'm always aware that everybody knows the Carousels and the Oklahomas and the Singing in the Rain. So there's a lot of shows we do that people know well. But with our audience, to take them a bit like Sweeney or Gypsy into slightly less well-known territory is very exciting. So we alight, and for Michael, I think the idea of it's a different sort of musical to the sort of musical Michael's done. Often he's done musicals that have been purely singing-led, or in fact, a lot of the ones he's famous for are sung through. So Mack and Mabel's a different sort of musical. It's book-led. So
does that mean that the storytelling happens in dialogue rather than in song? Well, is that what that means?
Well, it happens in both. The book of a musical is the script, and this is some musicals are equally led by the script as they are by the music, and Mack and Mabel's one of those. But the funny story is I first came across the show. The very first production in England was in 1981 in Nottingham Playhouse. And I, as a young man living in Nottingham, went to see it, along with Torval and Dean, who saw that production, who famously then used the overture as one of their skating numbers. This is where the funny bit goes. I was saying to Michael, because we've talked about the show didn't open brilliantly on Broadway. It was criticised for many things. And I remember sitting there to Michael going, but I saw it in Nottingham when I was 15 or something. I remember it being rather wonderful. And I said, there was this brilliant actor and this brilliant actress and this great story. And he said, you know who was playing Mabel? I said, I've no idea who was playing Mabel, but she was brilliant. He said, you fool, it was Imelda Staunton. So it's always been, Mabel's always been a part that's been a young actress, been a discovery. It was must have been one of Imelda's early shows. When it was done on Broadway, it was Bernadette Peters, just as Bernadette was emerging. I don't think it was her first Broadway show, but it was very early on. So because in the story, Mabel Normand is discovered as a young. She's not an actress; she's a waitress in the story. So you discover somebody as part of putting the show on.
And had Michael sung it before? I mean, I know he's sung songs from it, but had he actually played Mack before?
I don't believe so. Although his recent tour, because he knew he was doing this, I Won't Send Roses, featured large as part of publicising the fact
There's
that
a lot of it on YouTube, actually.
I can imagine.
So you've got this memory of it, and it was one of those, and the success, as you say, of the ones that you've done leading up to this. Did you feel that it was about Michael's availability? Because it is a star role. Without the Mac, you haven't really got the show, have you?
Yeah, it was very much about Michael. I mean, it's often that two things come together. It was like Arturo Ui. It was a play I'd always been interested in, and Henry Goodman was an actor I'd often worked with, and it was when the two things came together. You'll see when you see the show, one of the things that was criticised about the show originally is Mack, who's a movie producer, Mack Sennett, famous movie producer, is written, and I think this is the strength of the book and the strength of the story, is he's written as a slightly unpleasant, tough, driven man. And we all know producers like that. They're not always the most polite. Money and time are often very important to them, and the niceties of how they deal with people aren't. So there's a great truth in that. There was a sense, though, and a worry that Mack wasn't sympathetic enough as a character. Now, the one thing, if you've seen Michael on stage over the years, is what he has in spades is charm. So for Michael to play this rough, tough man, who's rude to people. One of my favourite lines, which was often cut after the first one because they were worried that he was too unpleasant, was he turns to one of his stars very early on who's tired and wants a break from filming, and he turns around and calls her a broken down hoofer. And you go, it's great, it's accurate, but it had become sanitised in some of the productions. So we felt that Michael had the right, Abe is brave enough to not need to be liked, but also the natural charm that means you
and of course worry. It makes sense of the love story. I don't think that is a spoiler in this sort of thing, in that you can see that she believes when he says, I won't send you flowers, I'm not going to be that sort of guy, that what she's thinking is, yeah, but you will really. You're nice underneath. So it makes sense of that relationship.
I think there's many things, when you work on a piece, there's many things you know about it when you start, and there's many things you discover. One of the great discoveries of this was I knew Jerry Herman's music was wonderful. We all know some of these songs. What I hadn't quite clocked was how brilliant the lyrics are as well. And one of the things we did while we were rehearsing was we read through the lyrics as if they were words in a play. And I Won't Send Roses, because of course it's the most romantic tune, but the song is actually a man going, if you have a relationship with me, you're going to get none of this. These are the things you won't get. Be warned, stay away. And that's rather brilliant. The other brilliant thing that happens musically in the show, and I know it sounds, you wouldn't notice if I didn't say it, but most musicals that have, a love interest, there's a wonderful duet, somewhere towards the end of Act 1, where the two of them, because they're so in love, have to sing together. Brilliantly, because Mack and Mabel is about it's a disconnected love story on some levels. Although they sing the same song at different times, they never have a song together on stage. And dramatic, that's a brilliant artistic decision. And again, I didn't quite appreciate that till I started working on it. But I think the craftsmanship, Jerry Herman and Michael Stewart worked with Jerry Herman on Hello Dolly and did a whole load of other shows.
So did Barnum and 42nd Street.
Barnum, 42nd Street, absolute masters of their craft. And so working on it, whatever problems there might or might not be, you do feel there are a group of individuals who are right at the centre of their craft.
So who here has seen this production already? Oh, you're very good. Who's going in tonight? Do you want me to do the usual joke? Who hasn't bought a ticket? Nobody wants me to do that again. So one of the things that's so exciting is the fact that you're telling, the play is telling, the show is telling, the story of the death of movies, the silent movie in a way. Did you as preparation, once you'd put your company together, was that your first port of call about watching some of those movies to get that sort of movement?
We did. I think everybody did their own research, but we looked at tons, partly because we had to make some of these movies and also reference them. We also got our wonderful John Driscoll, who does our projection and made the movies with us. He found the most wonderful documentary that actually had shots of Senate Studios along with a whole load of stuff that was done at the time. And that was day one of rehearsal. That's what we played. It's a fascinating era in movie making, and it's slightly, because of course there's similarities. It's Singing in the Rain, but Singing in the Rain is set later. Singing in the Rain is set at that moment where talkies come in, just at the end of the silent movies. This starts in a very different era, and this felt very important to us in that, I don't know if any of you have seen that wonderful Richard Attenborough film of Chaplin. There's an image I always remember of Charlie Chaplin walking to the studio, and of course it was across the desert. You know, these studios were built in the desert, and he's walking through this dust bowl with chickens and dogs, and you know, they were real pioneers, these filmmakers, and a lot of them, you know, this is what happens to Mack Sennett. They left New York for a whole set of reasons, partly because you got more daylight and could film for longer in LA, also because Edison and the mafia had a stranglehold on the film stock, on the lighting equipment, and you got away from that by leaving. So they went out and carved this industry out of the desert, and it became what we think of as Hollywood. But it was nothing then. It was a bit of desert and a load of people making it out of nothing.
And there's that wonderful sense that you've captured so brilliantly about them all, in the end, being chancers. You know, they have a lot of guts and a lot of luck, I think one of them says. Mack says at one point, don't they? So with that sort of sense, you were making your own black and white film, you were watching that, you were researching. There are some big numbers, not least of all, You Don't Bring Me Flowers. Did the company have an idea of the sort of show you, Jonathan Church, were after, or did you create it with them? How clear was your vision?
I think by the time we went into rehearsal, I mean, Michael and I, this is an interesting part of the process, Michael and I, and Rob, our designer, we and Steve and the choreographer, we'd spent quite a lot of time together. The main thing is that Michael Stewart is no longer with us, the book writer, but his sister, Francine Pascal, who is a novelist in her own right and has done the rewrites over the years, Michael and I spent days in her apartment in New York looking at all the versions. We went to see archive footage of the original production with Robert Preston and Bernadette Peters. There isn't much, but we went to see. And so we'd spent quite a lot of time crystallizing our version of the script. So I think we were, sometimes you go into rehearsals not being sure. I think we were very clear. Also, the big question has always been, Mabel Normand, historically, died at a very early age, possibly drug-related.
Because they are real.
They are real, yeah, absolutely. So although the piece takes lots of liberties, and the great debate with the original New York run was, can you in 1974 on Broadway have a sad ending? And so they added on the tour on the way to Broadway a false happy ending, which has always been, Mack Sennett goes, I'm a movie maker, this isn't how I would have ended the story. And I think I actually saw a clip of this. There was a false wedding, a sort of weird slapstick Keystone Cops.
Sort of kind of cheat.
Yeah, and so it was a cheat. So there's always been a debate about this. And what Michael and I felt very strongly, and this ties into this is driven by the story, driven by the script. The character dies. We can cope with this now. We've got Les Mis, Miss Saigon. I don't think we need to be patronised. A story can be really rich if it doesn't end up with 20 people tap dancing in the rain. It doesn't have to.
Although we do like
that. It doesn't have to be the only way music can end. So we were pretty clear of the arc, and also I've often talked about the fact you have to find a framing device for a show, and a movie studio, we were pretty clear about all that, and that because the scenes ultimately are the driving factor between Mack and Mabel, not the songs. That we had to tell that story beautifully, but also that links back to the lyrics. The blending between, it's not a show where you stop and have a number. There's a couple of moments like that, but 90% of the numbers take place out of the action and drive the action forward or drive the relationship forward. And so the acting through the songs, and it's where Stephen Meara, choreographer, and these are things that you knew that when there's a song called Mabel Walks in the Room when she's persuaded to come back to the studio. And when you listen to it, it's a very high, it's a bit like Hello Dolly, in fact, but it's set very high, sung by a tenor. And we were all going, certainly the musical director and I, is this going to be a bit cheesy? Is this going to... And actually, because of the way Stephen staged it, the emotion of the actress that we care about coming back to her studio and all the people, the 20 people around who've been her family in the past singing to her, it suddenly becomes terribly moving, not just because of the song, but because of the acting within the number that Stephen staged. So I think that's the thing we've strived for, and I think, touch metal. We're
I'd offer my head, but
we're doing okay.
But can we take it to mean then, listening to you talk, that with this in particular, you, the director, have more influence over what you might change, what you might keep in, how you might direct things, or is it all there in the book and you have to follow it? It's just about interpretation.
I think a lot of it's interpretation. I mean, like any script's a blueprint. I mean, we've changed things, we've added things. Some wonderful things that Francine has done for us is just given Mabel, when we meet her as a waitress, one of the things that isn't contained in the piece and still isn't, but was true, was Mabel became really rather important. She directed Chaplin. She was one of the first female, stars who made work happen in her own right. She, on some level, she was pioneering in her own right. Just a few things have been added that allow, not just with her, but particularly with her, a little more strength, a little more knowingness, a little.
Modern? Is that about her being more modern as a woman?
Yeah, but they're small, but they're really important things. There's a couple of scenes that have been added, and some little bits of factual stuff that just give a context. Or, one of the issues with the relationship is Mack loves his work, perhaps a little more than he should. But a couple of the speeches that are about his passion for his work and him loving his work have been added, and it helps.
But you need to have permission from
Francine.
Francine, yes.
That's been the lovely thing, is we've had a living... it's always much more difficult trying to negotiate changes through lawyers or estates, which is what
So you want a live author,
So we want a living author.
A biddable living author.
So long as they like what you're doing. But Francine was with us in preparation. She was with us early in rehearsals, and she was with us in preview, and has helped shape, made great suggestions. And also she knows that the interesting thing she knows is the show. She's seen the show probably more times than she would care to have over the years. So her going, well, that bit of the relationship isn't quite landing, or isn't there something else you can get there? It's very meaningful.
And we're not going to obviously spoil it for those who haven't yet been in, but obviously since, as you all know, Mack's studio is the Keystone movie studio, you can imagine that some of the things that come out of that, everybody will know the Keystone Cops. There are some great set pieces, all very funny, very wonderful. Is the challenge there to actually let it speak for itself and not let it get too bonkers?
Too out of hand. Well, look, funnily enough, it was also one of the things that we, again, had help. I mean, the great thing is knowing what you can't do. And so one of the things that was questionable in the first production was some of those sequences. And some of them happen in the text, some of them happen in numbers. But you're referencing that movie world. We had two wonderful... physical performers who worked for a company called Spy Monkey, and they helped us and influenced the scenes that we did, but also in some of the numbers helped add elements that we would never have done. And again, I think we've honoured those quite well. and delivered them quite well. But yeah, it's a whole nother set of things. You know, it's complicated enough for the musical. You've got scenes, you've got music, you've got the choreography. We had to make movies, so we had that, and we had to deliver a whole set of a series of different slapstick routines. So the first week, and I kid you not, when Mabel, who's American, first time ever in Britain, she arrives in a room with a bunch of dancers and these two physical comedians who have them jumping around, wearing Red Indian costumes, jumping around, hitting each other on the head with truncheons, falling over, being stupid, wearing moustaches, all the kind of, exploring that world. So she must have thought we were completely bonkers.
But she is exceptional. And it was a very odd experience. I told Jonathan backstage that I looked at her and I knew it was her first time in the UK. And then I had seen her. She was the understudy for Carole King on Broadway in Beautiful. And I had seen her and been astonished to learn afterwards she was the understudy. She was so exceptional. You look like, and the company look like, you're all having a ball. But it's a very demanding show. Has it been the show, has it given you what you hoped for, Jonathan, when you decided, yes, I'm going to do it for this season?
Oh, more that, I mean, it's dangerous at a moment like this, but I think we're all very proud of it because there are so many difficulties and because it's, and we may not, with the critics, win this. It's labelled with the reputation of being a difficult show. We've not found it difficult. We found it, challenging technically. We've had an absolute ball working on it, and we've, found great pleasure in it, in the surprises that it has to offer, and in the skill of the people working with it. So, and look, you'll see, there's something about this.
Something about Mabel.
But there's something about this stage as well, that the fluidity that we can offer the. I hope it feels that it sits here very well. I think we've enjoyed it a lot. But whether everybody else will say we've cracked it or not, but certainly the word of mouth in Chichester seems to be all right.
Yeah.
So,
well, if it's all right in Chichester, no.
Well,
But no, I mean, it's amazing. It is joyous and it's fun and it's beautiful and it's very sad. And the plangency there is wonderful at as you said, your book framing at the beginning and the end. Because we have less time than usual, I'm mindful there are always certain people who would love to ask questions. So we're going to have time for about 3 questions before we give the stage back to the players. So fling your arm up now if you want to ask a question. Gentleman there, thank you. I'm just going to repeat that for people who didn't hear. The gentleman said he thought it was wonderful. I'm paraphrasing, obviously, and said, but it was interesting that he didn't leave. The whole show was great. It all hangs together beautifully, but didn't go away humming individual tunes like you sometimes do. And why you thought that was? Is it the whole is greater than the parts?
I think it's the structure. Sometimes some musicals you hit a particular number and it's repeated, it's brought back. Structurally, that doesn't happen. Probably, I Won't Send You Roses is the one you sort of hear it 3 times. But generally, you hear a number once and you've moved on. I also think because, as I said, you're often, the scenes are moving the action forward. You're not just concentrating on the tune, you're concentrating on what's happening through it. I have to say, sitting and working on it, you always have tunes going around in your head. Jerry Herman's tunes have got completely lodged, and on a different day, I'll wake up with a different one going round and round in my brain.
That's good, until Wednesday morning, and then the job is done, and you're off to the next thing. Is there another question? Greg up the back, and then gentleman in front, and then lady there. Me? Yep. You obviously narrated it too badly. The question was about the use of a narrator who is also part of the action and whether it works or not.
No, I think it's difficult. It's an interesting thing you bring up because, of course, doing Amadeus last year, it's a very similar structure to Mack and Mabel in that the man, beyond all the events, comes to tell you and you look and it's all a flashback. It's a memory play. The difficulty with narration is it's a device that's been now used so often that I think it has to be done terribly well for it to now still work. I think what I love is it's a very good way of getting your central character a relationship with the audience. You can tell the audience 50 things about you that if you were in a Rattigan play and couldn't talk to the audience would take you 45 minutes, and you can do it in 3 minutes. So I think there's a sort of, I felt this about Amadeus, but I feel this about Mack. In his first 2-minute speech, you find out so much about him, and that then informs the scenes that you next see. And I think it's a very good device when used properly and done well. And I think cheating with it, which some writers have been known to do, is very, very dangerous.
Go in the front here. Yep. Yeah, thank you. The question was, it's hard to find the right Mabel, and how involved Michael Bull was involved in that, in terms of the chemistry is absolutely crucial between them.
Very. I mean, one of the things, again, it was one of the questions about the original production of whether there was a chemistry between Bernadette Peters and Robert Preston. And so, like any love story, that chemistry is important. So Michael was very involved. We didn't get excited about the people we met here. So the search moved to America. And we've never done this before. Michael and I, the casting director was over there, met 50 Americans, honed it down. We were doing it all by video to half a dozen. And then Michael and I flew out and we met them. And I wouldn't have cast this without having Michael and the actress in the same room. And there are different... Ultimately, the reason we cast them was there was something in the room. Two actors have to enjoy playing with each other. And, as a young actress, standing toe-to-toe with Michael Bull, this very famous British music, not everybody has the guts for it, or has the courage to take that on. What we fell in love with, apart from the fact that Rebecca's a brilliant actress and stunningly, we have to also think about what she would look like on film. She's stunningly beautiful. But she stood toe-to-toe with Michael in that audition, and that's been the great joy of watching her work, both in the show but in rehearsal, is, she'll, maybe it helps being American, she'll treat him like any other actor, of course with lots of respect, but quite capable of taking the mickey out of him when she needs to.
Well, I think you've just shown to everybody why the musicals that start here and often go out into the world, and you will all know that Guys and Dolls is out there. Jonathan is about to go to Australia to see another Singing in the Rain. It's that level of work in order to get the casting right on which it all rests. And you're giving, of course, another very young, impressive actress over the way with a national legend. So you have that in both houses. I'm afraid that I need to bring it to a close because we must give the stage back to the people who own it. But it just remains for me to say that the post-show for Mack and Mabel is on the 3rd of August. You don't have to have gone into the show that night to see it, but you do still need to get a ticket in order to come in if you want to see it. I will be back on the 5th of August for a pre-show to interview Howard Davis for Services Rendered, which will be another wonderful show that's going to come in to the Minerva next.
Can I just add, I saw a run-through. I knew it was a wonderful play. I think it's an even more extraordinary play than I thought it was. If you think you know Somerset Maugham, go and see it. It's absolutely an exquisite piece of writing. Very surprising, given it was the early 30s. I'm terribly excited in the run-through. I think it's been beautifully done. But the play itself feels like, I talked about Rattigan, it feels like Rattigan's been compressed. So it would have taken Rattigan 3 hours to tell the story that Maugham somehow tells in 2 hours.
And that also, ladies and gentlemen, is why Jonathan is not only a brilliant director on the stage, a brilliant director of our beloved CFT. Ladies and gentlemen, Jonathan Church.